What's up, everyone? It's Julian, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make drums like Boards of Canada. So this one's been requested a bunch, and I'm going to be giving away the project file and samples from this video in the description, so you can pick those up there. And yeah, let's dive in. So the first sound that I have here is the hi-hat, which is 2 layers. It sounds like this. So what's going on here is basically I have this one, which is a synthesized hi-hat, which you can hear is more in the high end, and then this one, which is a sample, which is more giving it that kind of like texture that we want. So this is something that's pretty important for the Boards of Canada style drums, is you need to use sort of like a little bit more dirty, a little bit more textured, like hip hop style drums, to get that kind of like trip hop sound. Yeah, it's about combining both sort of things, like the more analog synthesized kind of sounds, and then the sampled vinyl sounds. So these two kind of work together here because, like I said, this one is in the high end, and then this one is the one that you're really hearing, like, to give it sort of like body. But they can't really work without each other. Like, if I play the lower one without the high one, it's kind of missing some high end. And if I play the high one without the textured one or the low one, it doesn't sound right either. So you need both of them for it to work. And yes, the way that I made this high one was with operator. What I have is I have some white noise. The envelope is just set like that. It's just a really short, clicky kind of sound. And what I got going on is that's going into a bandpass filter. So the bandpass filter is what shapes it. Kind of just hones in on a certain range of the frequency spectrum. And since we're using white noise, yeah, you can just use that to kind of shape your hi-hat. It's a really effective way to make hi-hats. I do this a lot in my videos if you guys watch the other ones. It's just a really cool way to make your own hi-hats. Now, where I took it a little bit further with this one was I added this envelope here on the filter. You can see it's a really short envelope. It's just adding that little click at the start. If I turn it off and then turn it back on, like, yeah, you can hear it's just adding that click. I felt like it added to the high end. Again, in this case, I was specifically making this to sort of add some high end to things, so I wanted to bring that out, and that was a good way to do that. And then for the sampled one, like I said, you know, it's just about finding like kind of a good sampled hi-hat from like a sample pack or from an old drum break or something like that. And yeah, so the next thing we have here is the kick, which sounds like this. And so this kick is 2 layers, just like the hi-hat. It's this sort of low kick, and then this vinyl kick. So the way that I made the low kick was I started with this sample. So kind of just like a nice like 808 style kick. This goes back to what I was saying before, like sort of combining synthesized sounds that you can use to add punch and power to your beats with like more kind of vinyl or like sampled kind of sounds that have a lot of nice texture. So this is more of like the, yeah, like the synthesized kind of like 808 kick. Basically what I did was I took this sample and I put it into a simpler here, and then what I did was, if you go into the controls here, you can see I played around with the pitch envelope. So I had the pitch envelope on 48%, or on 48 semitones. It's all the way up. And then I have a really short decay, and that's what's giving it that click. And sort of like the punch. Like if you listen to this original sound, it has a really nice texture to it, but it's not like punchy. Like it doesn't really hit like that. So this pitch envelope just adds that. It adds sort of like a click at the start of the sound. And yeah, it's a really effective way to give your drums some more punch. Then on the vinyl kick, what I have is, so I took this sample as a kick sample from a drum break, and what I did was I put that into a simpler. I put it through a utility as well because you can hear there's a bit of weird stereo stuff going on there. So yeah, I'm just using that to convert it to mono using the left ear. You can kind of see that here, like how those little waveforms split. That's the weird stereo stuff I'm talking about. But yeah, so then what I did was I went into the controls here, and I changed a few things. So for one, I changed the amp envelope. You can see I just kind of made it a little bit shorter. That's a long sample, so I just wanted to, like, yeah, kind of clean it up and just sort of get, like, the impact part of it. And then after that, I added a low-pass filter. And then on the low-pass filter, what I did was I actually put an envelope. So this is kind of a good technique for, like, sampled kicks. I actually learned this through doing techno kicks, funny enough. But yeah, it's a good way to kind of give your kicks, like, you can still have them have that nice click to them, especially because this one is really, like, mostly supposed to be the texture and, like, I don't want to say the high end, but it's not just completely low end like this one. So it's nice because what you can do with this filter envelope is essentially you can have it be open at the very start of the sound and still get that nice transient or the click, just the very beginning of the hit like that. But then the filter envelope will essentially make it close over the course of when the song plays. And yeah, then the ending doesn't have to also be like the same amount. So, it's just kind of a nice way to control it. So that was how I made the kick. It's just about sort of layering these together. And the thing you'll notice here too is there's really not a lot of processing on these drums. Like with these kind of drums, you got to think like back in the day, Boards of Canada, they didn't really have a lot of, super modern gear like we have now, or like software where you can just put a bunch of effects on everything and compress everything and saturate it all and all that. Like it was kind of just a matter of like knowing how to layer things together back in those days, at least back in like the early Boards of Canada stuff. So it's kind of what I'm doing here. Like it's just more about layering and volume and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so then the next sound that we have here is the snare, which sounds like this. So just like everything before it, this is also 2 layers. We have this vinyl snare. And then I actually have a clap. So you can hear what's going on here. Basically, yeah, it's just like a snare sample from a drum break. I believe it was the same one as that kick. You can kind of hear, they sound kind of similar in texture. It's a good technique. Like if you use drums from the same break and sample them all, if you use different ones, you can get cool textures as well. But if you use drum hits from the same break and sort of like, use them to build out the drums in your track, you can get a really like cohesive feel. Like it'll really help you if you're having trouble getting your drum sounds to kind of sound like they're in the same world. I definitely recommend that technique. Try sampling like a kick and a snare and a hi-hat from a drum break and then playing around with them because it'll make it all sound really cohesive. But yeah, so I took this snare. I didn't really do too much to it. I just kind of put it in here. I added a bit of a fade on the end because, it's just kind of a long sample. And then I just converted that to mono, because there's some weird stereo stuff going on. So this is kind of more of like the impact of the snare, like the body. If I show you on a spectrum here, you can see like it's really hitting around 220 hertz or so, which is like right where you would want a snare like this to hit for sort of the punch. And then I have the clap layer. So the clap is kind of more like in the high end. It's like I was doing with the hi-hats where we have this one that's more for like texture and sort of like body. And then this one gives it that like nice sort of sparkly quote-unquote high end. So that's kind of the purpose of this. This clap just gives it like a nice kind of high-end layer. And also it gives it some nice like kind of crunch or like more of an impact. Because this snare is good and it is punchy, but it's not really like, it's not really slamming like the way you would want it to. So this just adds a nice kind of like crackiness to it. So yeah, and then when you put those two together, I feel like they fit really well. So then the last thing I will show you here is the percussion, which sounds like this. So we have 2 things. Basically, the first one is really simple. It's just this little percussion sound. It plays right before the snare on that little 16 note. This is just something I've heard Boards of Canada doing. This actually is kind of an important thing though, because in here I've kind of focused on like the kicks and the snares and the hi-hats and all that. But adding little percussive elements like this can be really helpful. Like you don't even have to do it this way. Like one thing I noticed they do sometimes is they'll have like a percussion hit that kind of like hits at the same time as the snare. So like maybe something like this. Where you can like hear them at the same time. Like it's just important to bring these little things in because it adds like a nice kind of uniqueness to your beats. Like anybody could kind of set up a simple beat like this. But when you add little things like this, and I think this is what makes it so good in Boards of Canada's music, it just adds like a nice little kind of extra touch to it. So yeah, so then the other thing with the percussion here is this vinyl shaker, which sounds like this. So the way that I made this was I took a shaker from a drum break, that one, and yeah, so I just took that little short part of it, and then you can see I just kind of have it looped. I duplicated it over a bunch of times, and I also pitched this down because if you look at this, I'll show you, it fits, it doesn't really fit perfectly with the beat at the original pitch. It's a little weird, but if we pitch it down -2, There we go. It's got the same timing. So, yeah, you know, just kind of a good way to do it. I like doing it that way instead of warping because it feels a little bit more natural. So yeah, so after I did that, all I did was I just have an EQ8 here, cutting out the low end, because with this one, I know I was saying before, like, you want to focus more on layering and just sort of being creative with, like, volumes and stuff. But with this, you kind of need to filter it because you can hear there's just a lot of nasty low end in there that you really wouldn't want in like a shaker like that. So that was what I did. And then the last thing I did on here was I added a bit of track delay. So track delay, if you don't know, is essentially basically the way you turn it on is with this little D icon here, and then it's this little slider over here. And what it does is it just moves the contents of your track over to the right. It'd be the same thing as if I just did that, however many milliseconds, like 10 milliseconds. But it's a lot easier to work with here because you can keep everything like on the grid and yeah, still move it with the track delay. So that was what I did. I just put it back at 10 milliseconds. Since we're at 89 BPM, I didn't want to go too hard. If you go like a little bit too much at the slower tempos like this, it can get kind of weird. So yeah, I just did it 10 milliseconds. But this is a really good way to give your drums some groove because what happens is this kind of like, it pushes it a little bit back. Like it kind of, like I said, it's pushing it over to the right. And what that does is it makes the shaker kind of sit a little bit more interestingly over your groove. If I turn off the track delay, you can hear it's really straightforward, but when I add it, I find it makes me bob my head a little bit more. Like, it just gives it a little bit more of like a groove and kind of a cool feel. So yeah, so that's pretty much it for this one. You know, I just want to make this video after I made the Boards of Canada synth tutorial. Got a bunch of requests for this one, so I figured, why not? And yeah, so that's going to be it for today, guys. Make sure to let me know what you think of this video in the comments. And make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. Once again, you can get the project file and samples from this video for free. So make sure to pick that up. In the description, you can check out my social media, which is on the screen right now. And yeah, thank you again, everybody. And I will see you tomorrow with another tutorial.